Hey, welcome to Series 13 and number 5, and we're looking at Acts chapter 22 and through into 23. It says in verse 30 of 22, "But on the next day, desiring to know the real reason why he was being accused by the Jews, he unbound him and commanded the chief priests and all the council to meet. And he brought Paul down and set him before them." Now, it's interesting, isn't it? Sometimes people don't know what the real agenda is, and they just want to find out. So the tribune, his way of doing it is putting Paul in front of all of his accusers. And Paul, as usual, is up to it. In fact, he uses the situation. Let's see what he does. Verse 1. "And looking intently at the council, Paul said, 'Brothers, I have lived my life before God in all good conscience up to this day.'" And what a way to start. Basically, he said, "I've done my best and lived with integrity." Of course, that kind of statement upsets some people. It is interesting that people react when you say something that isn't within their preconceived ideology. Here, it's not just getting upset. They get physical nearly. Verse 2 goes on and says, "And the high priest Ananias commanded those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth." Paul then uses his knowledge of Pharisaic law, which is based on, but not necessarily always biblical. Listen to how Paul responds. "Then Paul said to him, 'God is going to strike you, you whitewashed wall. Are you sitting to judge me according to the law, and yet, contrary to the law, you order me to be struck?' Those who stood by said, 'Would you revile God's high priest?'" Yeah. But notice here that the high priest is giving instructions to physically harm Paul. He probably should know better than that. Paul goes on and says, "I did not know, brothers, that he was the high priest, for it is written, 'You shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people.'" Paul goes on, he goes, "Whoops, didn't know that." But it gives him an idea. Now, Paul had perceived that one part of the crowd were Sadducees and the other Pharisees. He cried out in the council, "Brothers, I am a Pharisee, a son of Pharisees. It is with respect to the hope and the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial." He sprouts his credentials, yes, but he also creates a theological division. And they react to that. Verse 7 goes on, he said, "And when he had said this, a dissension arose between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the whole assembly was divided. For the Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, nor angel, nor spirit, but the Pharisees acknowledge them all." Well, here we see the difference in religious political system. They couldn't agree on their theology, yet they wanted to work together when a completely different theology turns up, like Paul's. Yeah, bit of lack of integrity there. Verse 9 goes on and says, "And then a great clamour arose, and some of the scribes of the Pharisees' party stood up and contended sharply. 'We find nothing wrong with this man. What if a spirit or an angel spoke to him?'" All of a sudden, the tide's turned, hasn't it? Now the Pharisees stick up for Paul, but there's chaos in the room. And note the wording, a great clamour. Imagine it. All these religious bigwigs, not really the warrior type of guys, but the religious bigwigs yelling their stuff, not listening, crazy stuff. And it gets worse. Verse 10 goes on and says, "When the dissension became violent, the tribune, afraid that Paul would be torn to pieces by them, commanded the soldiers to go down and take him away from them by force and bring him back to the barracks." Yeah, here we go again. The Romans save Paul. But it's back to prison, basically. But I love this next bit. "The following night, the Lord stood by him and said, 'Take courage, for as you have testified to the facts about me in Jerusalem, so you must testify also in Rome.'" Jesus is saying here, hey, this is what's going to happen. Just like here, you will do it in Rome. You'll do it again. Paul gets his purpose from God, a direction for his ministry even. Is that how we see the tough stuff that we're involved in? Do we see that it's setting direction for the future and giving us a purpose? Now that's really worth thinking about, isn't it? Have a great week. Bless you.